is Greg Kahn. I am the CEO of GK Digital Ventures, an advisory and investment firm in the intersection of media, tech, sport, and advertising. And I'm also the co-founder of AI Trailblazers. And I'm thrilled to be leading a conversation today as part of the Digital Hollywood series with an incredible group of executives to talk about AI and XR and storytelling, the creativity beyond the algorithm. So today's session is we're bringing together some of the most innovative voices in generative storytelling, immersive experience design, and interactive performance. These individuals create digital twins in real time to embedding emotional intelligence in characters. They're pioneers that are building the systems, formats, and platforms that are defining the next generation of storytelling. We're going to talk about moving beyond the algorithm towards a collaborative, intentional future for creators and audiences alike. And our panelists are going to bring real-world examples of what they have been working on today, the good, the bad, and we'll kick right into it. So I'm going to turn it to each of my panelists, and I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself for about 30 seconds or so, and then we'll get into a great conversation. And I'm going to start with Jeff Burke.
Thanks, Greg. So I'm Jeff Burke. I'm a professor and the chair of the theater department at UCLA in the School of Theater, Film, and Television. I'm also the associate dean for research and creative technology at TFT. Most of what I do is look at how artists and engineers can work together on emerging technologies, particularly around experiences that are at the intersection of the digital and the physical. And we've been doing that, for some time, but I think it's a particularly exciting time for reasons that I'm sure we'll get into. And so really happy to be here and talk a bit about what we're up to.
Terrific, Jeff. Nigel.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me today. My name is Nigel Tierney. I'm the executive creative director over at Yahoo. I previously ran our innovation lab via Verizon and Riot. And I come traditionally from the filmmaking and animation background. I've directed and produced quite a bit of content in that realm. And always I've just loved how the intersection of technology and storytelling can enhance and enable each other. And I'm continuing to push that now within the Yahoo ecosystem and how we deploy the latest in immersive storytelling tools, as well as ethically deploying like AI solutions and how we get that content out across all of our users and make sure people are experiencing it in the best way possible.
Thanks, Nigel. Rosemary.
Yeah, thanks for having me here. I am the co-founder and CEO of Badass Studios, and we create real-time digital twins of live events as they happen. So think races, football, sports events, but also entertainment. And I have a background in gaming, using gaming for serious purposes. So anything from mental health for kids to smart cities to diabetes, think of those things. And now I'm bringing all of that storytelling into entertainment with Badass.
Love it, Rosemary. And Guy.
Hey, hi everyone. I'm Guy Gadney. I'm CEO of Charismatic.ai. My background's always been in that intersection between technology and storytelling or media. And then more recently, we've just come out of stealth with Charismatic.ai, which is really a summation of a lot of the things we've learned around how AI can assist the creation of storytelling. So it's really tell us a prompt, tell us the idea for the story, and then we'll generate the script. And then that script then goes out into generative video systems. So you can be up from an idea onto screen in minutes now.
Fantastic. Well, I know we can go on all day, but let's jump right into it because we have about 45 minutes. You couldn't go anywhere in 2025 and also the back half of 2024 without talking about AI and agentic AI. But I really want to spend some time today talking about sort of how the heart of storytelling is about human connection and emotion and narrative intent. So while there are new platforms and new formats, but I want to have a discussion about how we're creating and why we're creating and who gets to participate in that creating. So why don't we jump in, and Rosemary, I'm gonna kick it off to you to start. Would love to get your perspective on what storytelling formats are emerging beyond the screen that feel promising. You mentioned that you've done work in everything from smart cities and mental health to to the sporting industry. And I'd love to just get your perspective of what is emerging beyond the screen.
Yeah, I think it's all about human connection and how people connect with a story behind it. In the case of mental health, for example, we used metaphors of a city that's been hit by a storm to explain how kids that had chronic illnesses were faring mentally. And even now in sports, which, yes, it's more entertainment, but it's about connecting to people, right? I mean, Drive to Survive has shown us that Formula One is now huge because of the connection we have with the characters that come with that sport. And so for me, it's all about what can we do with mixed reality, virtual reality storytelling to engage a very young audience with these people that are in those sports and in that entertainment to really create those connections and foster them for long term. So to make them true fans, if you will. And I think that only goes through story.
That makes a lot of sense. Nigel, would love your perspective.
Yeah, I think beyond story, it's world building, right? We're seeing, I think the trajectory of immersive technology and immersive experiences have kind of always had they've been out of sync in a way. Like money has gone towards the content, but the hardware is trying to catch up, and the hardware is excellent, and then the money has fallen out of content. And if you think of a world pre-pandemic and VR and immersive, and then like during the pandemic everyone was online, and then kind of coming out of the pandemic where we're all really thirsty for experiences, for real world action, but how do we enhance them and augment them? So I don't know, I'm very bullish on the real world of it all in that engagement, but also in these virtual worlds. You look at where again young people are playing today. Like my 12-year-old is inside of Minecraft and Roblox while also having a Zoom open or FaceTime open with his buddies, and they're building the world and they're sharing the world and they're sharing finances in the world and all sorts of things. And then like watching that type of content and additional experiences, whether it be Twitch streaming or YouTube, there's just this world, like being a part of something. And I think to Rosemary's point about like gaming and showing up at an event that's interesting, you want to be able to not only have that real world moment, but you want to take that back digitally and share that and experience that in different ways. So yeah, it's kind of this constant amalgamation, like a giant cocktail of experience that we all, we're not one thing, we're not a headset, we're not a device, but we're everywhere in that sense.
Yeah, Nigel, we just finished the FIFA Club World Cup, and 80,000 fans were here in New Jersey. But at the same time, I was watching it with a friend who is a creator, the top FIFA creator for Roblox. And so, it's fascinating to see how the physical and digital are coming together. Jeff, UCLA certainly one of the leading institutions in the country as it relates to, the future of entertainment and tech. Love to get your perspective on how location-based experiences and physical digital hybrids are evolving.
Yeah, I guess to maybe riff a little bit on what Rosemary and Nigel had said, something that's exciting for me is the shift in how we think about characters and the characters as guides or kind of co-experiencers of those physical spaces. So I think obviously physical immersion gives you access to all the senses. It gives you a way of kind of thinking locally in terms of people that you're encountering, and maybe just not about a global media brand or something that's off in the ether. But the thing that's been sort of exciting about the last couple rounds of research and production that we've been doing is students getting involved in writing characters that sit in different places, help you navigate the world, sit outside, kind of almost in the real world, help you navigate a kind of fictional world that you might engage with, help you then enter that world, participate in it, become a character, step out of it again. And I think the role of the physical environment as inviting you to participate and participate with your whole body or all your senses with somebody next to you, I think is really unique. It's maybe hard for me to separate it from what's happening in real-time media and machine learning, because it means we can bring media and our understanding of what people do in physical space kind of into contact with traditional theatrical techniques and traditional kind of connection to character. So I guess one of the exciting things for me is sort of the shift in how we can think about character in intersection with these physical immersive spaces.
That's terrific. Guy, over to you. Perfect time to talk about character. Is there a sweet spot between automation and authorship? When you're creating characters and thinking about characters, what is that sweet spot between the technology and the automation piece and just the creative and the narrative side?
Yeah, so I think we tried to look at it from through a lens of asking the question, what is it that we can do now that we couldn't do before? I think we're seeing the first stage of AI applied to existing media doing the same thing. As McLuhan says, we look at the future through the rearview mirror. So it's sort of mirroring what we've already done. But that thing of what can we do now that we couldn't do before is interesting. And from the lens of storytelling, the way that we've always looked at things, and I like to break it down in a story into three parts, which is the story world, which is where it happens, the narrative, which is what happens in that story world, and then the characters. And the moment you start to move into more of an immersive, interactive space, it's the characters that we emote about, that we connect with, that we have this emotional connection with. So we've long looked at how can we harness that into the story and almost like cast you inside the story and being able to speak to the characters and so forth. So for us, that ability to do something new is really exciting. And why would you do it? Well, because audiences want it. They're excited. It draws people in when there's this sort of innovation. So that I think is where we've seen the AI and to as Jeff was alluding to, just mentioning things like real time. Actually, the closer we get to real time generation of stories, the more immersive they can feel, because we can draw in, almost like improv moments which draw on people's lives, the audience's lives, and build them in. And again, just to finalize, we find the further we look into the future of this storytelling, actually, the more we get inspired by further back in history through theatre and immersive theatre and people who have sort of worked out how to sort of generate these stories and bring them to life. So that intersection for us and doing something new that allows creators to do something new is it's so exciting to see. And you know the positivity around it is just enthralling.
Yeah. Nigel, I want to turn it over to you at your work at Yahoo. I opened by sort of saying that every conversation it relates to AI, and there's some skepticism. I'm very optimistic of what's going to come with AI, particularly as it relates to storytelling. But I'd love to get your perspective on how AI shifts the roles on a creative team, from the writer to the developer to the performer. What are you seeing at Yahoo?
Yeah, I think there's a variety of things that we're honestly seeing in terms of both like content creation and assistance, right? Like first and foremost, how do you look at these tools as partners that you can work with? Being the director, being the creative vision around whether it's like developing a new product offering, right? And you want to go, okay, here's hey AI agent X, or I won't insert brands yet, but like how can you help me discover this part or code this moment or envelop this. That being said, I think one of the things we're really focused in on both personally for me as well as Yahoo is the ethical aspects of it, being really thoughtful around we're all in this content world together because we care passionately and deeply about storytelling, about experiences, about characters matter. And the effort and work that goes into that is meaningful, and we don't want to necessarily leverage tools that are sourcing that data in any form of unethical way. So first and foremost, I'm thinking about like the source data. How can we localize? How do we build our own solutions that can then come in and serve? So like again, if it comes to storytelling, a version of a chatbot that I'm able to like feed previous versions of like scripts or stories that can then like iterate and tell me like you've never done this before, you've never thought of this, and it's like, oh, okay, well, there is a reason why I didn't think of that. Please be quiet. Or that's actually a great point. Let me let me engage there. So I think it's leveraging the tools to be a creative partner. And then on the consumer side, being very honest about disclosure, like what is generated by AI, how you're consuming it. Again, I think we do enter in a world of like a wide spin of, when you're dealing with things like news, and we want to be very cognizant of like, okay, this is summarized, or this is edited in a way, but also just being earnest and honest with disclosures, not just matching like legal, but also just again getting ahead of it, so we can actually show that there is value in this type of content, and also kind of avoiding the dangers of slop and the like. Hey, there's a world where was it Italian brain rot on Instagram is a vibe, and I get it, but there's a reason why we know what it is, versus like where there's anything that's kind of again just not being honest about what it's trying to be or what it's trying to do. So
yeah, and Jeff, I want to kind of build on what Nigel is talking about, and specifically related to the ethics in AI, and the number one use case for ChatGPT over the past couple of months has been companionship, right? That folks are looking for companions, and certainly there's an opportunity for creators to work within that. And my question here is sort of what happens when characters become responsive, right? When they're evolving with audience input. What do you see? You're teaching the future generations and growing up. How do you share a little bit of your thoughts on that when characters become responsive?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think our when students have looked at trying to create, at least a lot of the examples I think so far of autonomous characters that our students have come up with are tied somehow to AI, right? So there's some sort of inherent like connection to technology, but I think one of the maybe shifts that we've started to see is more in the I don't know. I would say authorial voice more broadly, the idea of the author being present in a different way through the voice of a character. And so there's been less experimentation, I think, at least from the students that I've worked with, than you would think in like a character that is autonomous and stands alone and you have an interaction with. I think that's maybe a little more common in a gaming context or something, of where you're thinking of an NPC that's going to have a certain relationship. They've tended to be this kind of this voice that comes out in a way of carrying the writer through to a production environment, or carrying them all the way through into a dialogue with an audience that they didn't have before, that maybe is through multiple characters. And so I don't know if it's exactly answering your question, but I think some of the maybe the breadth of thinking that writers are having is more is broader than just a single autonomous character, right? It's a sort of story world that responds through the voice of multiple characters to input and engagement with the audience. And I guess it has, for me, a little bit more excitement than the idea of getting attached to one character that's somehow autonomous and detached from the writer. So a little bit of a tangent, but I like this sort of thought of authorial intent executed through multiple characters in parallel, and that's kind of where some of the interesting ideas from students, either as directors or writers, that I've seen come out.
That's super interesting. Rosemary, I want to come over to you because you shared in our pre-chat some amazing work that you're currently doing on the ground there in Europe. First, love for you to just share with everybody what you're working on today, because I think they'd be really excited to hear what Badass is doing. So share what you're currently working on right now.
Sure. Yeah, we're currently in Monaco, where tomorrow we have a race, which is a electrical powerboat series. It's called the E1 series, and it's a championship where electrical powerboats, much like Formula One, go around the world. They have different tracks in locations such as Monaco. And what we do is we build a digital twin of the entire world, so of Monaco in this case, and then also the boats, which they call race birds. They're very beautiful hydrofoil electric boats. And then as the race is happening tomorrow in real time, we take all of that content and we then make that available to the audience in new and interesting way. We're kind of designing experience for a lean forward generations, if that makes sense. So Gen Z, Gen Alpha, people that want more immersion, more agency, and really want to interact with the sport. And so part of what we do is augmented reality broadcasts, which is something that's been coming up more and more, where you see overlays and characters and you see profiles of racers, for example, race lines, those kind of things, so more informative. But also we use the entire world that we've built in Unreal Engine, which is of course a gaming engine, but also used in film and production. And we give them that as camera options so that they don't necessarily have to use drones if they don't want to. They just have all kinds of different ways of looking at that world. So it goes into some of the world building that we mentioned before. And on top of that, we then use it to then be able to play a game so that you can ghost race in real time against the pilots as they go around the track. So this then makes it really an involved sport. So, we in our generation, we can sit and watch, and the kids can actually interact with it and can play the game. We can play that locally, but also at home, and they can see if they measure up. And this is what we hope to then also translate into other sports, such as football, for example, or into concert. Imagine if you're at a concert and now you're thinking, well, I actually really like this artist. And in virtual reality or in a mixed reality case, you could potentially upgrade. You could go to a different spot, which in the real world you couldn't. So it's all about mixing real with unreal. So we use Unreal Engine as a gaming engine. We use Google Maps. We use real location-based information to tell the story of the location, and then we bring the characters into it. So we explain more about, who is racing, why are they racing, what's their background, and how's that going, so that people can really emotionally connect with the statistics, the visuals, the fun, and the story of the people that are in this sport.
So I love it. There's so much to unpack in that, Rosemary, but I want to get to everybody here because I think you brought up all of these new technologies that are coming to the forefront at once. So, question for everybody, I'm going to kind of start with you, Guy, is how do you think we should balance education and entertainment in these emerging formats, right? Like you have Gen Alpha and Gen Z growing up in a very different environment than folks that are, boomers or Gen X, and it's all exciting, it's all coming to the forefront, but in some sense it can be confusing, right? So how do you think we should balance as an industry kind of this education and entertainment in all these emerging formats?
Well, from our perspective, the two are really closely aligned anyway. I mean, the idea of sort of edutainment has been around for a long time, and connecting the two. We do a lot of work with universities around the world to build education courses using AI. That's great. But also, let's go back to the core, which is the power of storytelling. And the whole point of storytelling is a way for humans to communicate. And that can be a way to educate people, to pass information and pass emotion. So I think for me, the technology for me is like another paintbrush. It's another paintbrush in the tool that a writer or a creator can use. And as we're seeing, as Jeff was talking about, these characters that we connect with, it's like the writer's got a role of a puppet master. They're sort of guiding how these characters are going to evolve throughout the story based on the interactions that the writer has and so forth. So to me, I think it's a beautiful hybrid, and it totally works, and there's a great market there.
That's great. Nigel, I want to come to you. We've talked about a lot of different formats already in this conversation. Where are you seeing the most creative freedom today?
Yeah, I think the most creative freedom, that's a great question, because I think in both kind of advice on the education side, while also pulling that in, we're just being exposed to more and more tools to be able to do things. Like traditionally by trade, my background, I was actually computer science major, did my master's in computer science. Now, just yesterday I had Cursor open with Claude Code, and I was just having it generate, product examples for me, at a whim. And I remember just trying to program functions just to do that would take weeks. That being said, I was able to have an understanding of seeing what the code was showing up and taking that knowledge base that I had from programming to be able to see what was happening. And I guess to that point, and also even to what Guy was saying, being a director, being a storyteller, you have a point of view. And you will do anything to get that point of view across. I think now we're becoming more and more generalists, right? Again, in the world of, say, CG animation, before you would be, I'm just going to be a modeler, I'm just going to be a rigger, or an animator or a lighter. Now there is a requirement to be more robust as a CG generalist, right? And I think even more and more AI tools are being onboarded. Yes, you can do, there are examples right now in the world of individual storytellers creating shorts and creating film by themselves using a mix of pulling out their phone and then pulling in prompts and doing a whole variety of things by themselves. And what's incredible there is that hugely democratized so many things. Like when the phone democratized, or like the digital camera democratized film, we're just seeing like an exponential growth there. And so I think from a advice nearly on the educational side is like still having and understanding your craft and your point of view and what you want to tell and what stories you think are unique. Because I do think sometimes you can get lost in that shuffle of like, oh, I need to become a great Photoshop person, or I need to become a great. But no, it's just you want a great picture, right? You want to get drawing, you want a great film, and so I would say just continue to focus in on the craft and that result and your point of view. And I think all of this just being very open to the tools. Like don't be blind or naive to what's out there. And then specific on your creative question, I just I think being open to what's out there right now as well, like and me personally, like you, everyone, like we're always constantly learning. And I think the change is happening. Probably by the end of this call, there'll be some new tools that will come out that will, make certain things obsolete or will have enhanced workflows. And, you just have to be always on the ball and not defeated by it, understand how these things can be helpful for you to, to enhance and improve your workflows. So.
I love it. Jeff, my fellow UCLA Bruin, I mentioned in our pre-call that I launched the first virtual film school in the year 2000 at UCLA, and things have changed just a little bit since that time. Love to get your perspective, Jeff, on the role that universities are playing in preparing next gen creators. Right? There's again so many tools. Nigel just mentioned that. While we finish the phone, we'll pick up and see 17 new tools that have been developed. But how do universities sort of keep up in this world? Share your perspective.
Yeah, I think I think the conventional role that universities have played is still incredibly valuable in terms of having a broad exposure to different types of disciplines and ways of thinking, and sort of separating. I think Nigel was kind of getting at this idea of separating your creative objectives from tools, while also trying to understand the materiality of those tools. But I think, increasingly something that I've been thinking about, particularly for larger universities and research universities, is the opportunity to bring artists a little closer to the process of designing and shaping the tools that we sort of receive now, and that there's an opportunity to do more production as research in a university context. We have a theater department and a film department. We also have computer science and all the other disciplines as well. And one of the things that is difficult but has been really rewarding is to try to make creative projects with tools that are not done yet, and to try to do it in a way where the artistry or the sort of creative objectives are shaping those tools. And this is something that universities can do with a different sort of risk profile than an industry player, with a different perspective than a tech company. And we do it really effectively in the health sciences, right? We put clinical practice and research and training all together, and we kind of do it with real patients in the real world. And I think that's a really sort of nice, not new, but a nice and important opportunity as we see really all the tools shifting and changing underneath us and becoming a bit more computational and data driven, but also hopefully, to go back to your very first point, connected to physical experience, connected to sort of our increasing understanding of how we could communicate with computers in new ways in these creative experiences. So I think the opportunity for me, the one that's maybe less realized than I would like, is the idea of universities bringing creative production and research on new tools together, and really integrating them at a high level, doing it at a way where UCLA or our peer institutions, are producing stuff that is competitive with any kind of creative product out there.
Rosemary, I want to turn back to you, just building on what Jeff was saying. again, you're experimenting with so many different formats at the same time. What would you like to see in terms of education, for the next gen coming up that you're seeing that people are asking questions about or wanting to see more in terms of formats?
Yeah, I think for us, there's two things, right? One is what I would like to see so that we can employ these people as well, right? There's one thing like people that are in technology or are going to be in technology. And I think for me, the most important part, actually, Nigel mentioned, is really the curiosity to keep learning, because there's no way I can hire somebody now that will be useful to me in 5 years with what he knows now. It just isn't going to happen, especially with AI evolving now that we have. There's so many new tools out there, but there's also new ways that people will work together, and that's kind of where I come to the other side of it. Part of what we want to do with the stuff that we create is also educate and tell these stories, right? All of us as creators. As an example here with the race, it's all about electric, green, and marine practices. Really giving more of a future, for example. And we see that that's really a collaboration between many parties to also help with education. It's the schools. Schools bring school kids by to be educated while we're at the race. The pilots are the ones that helping to educate the kids about what they're doing and what it's like to be a pilot and how they got into racing. The teams help them, educate them about what the electricity is about and how that works and how things are powered up. And our role, I see also as badass, is to show them a little bit of how much fun that can also be and where the future can be going for them and how they can really connect with this sport to learn from something from it long term. So I think that we also work a lot with universities for that reason. I think that it's not just where it's changed, it's not just one educational system anymore. I think there's different ways of educating yourself, and ideally you get access to a lot of them and over time so that you have a well-rounded education.
I love that. Yeah, I want to turn it over to you and come back to this notion of storytelling and the humanization of kind of everything that's being developed. In the context of AI, what is possible when AI characters can develop memory or context or improvisation?
Well, it's a bit like I was talking about with the writer as the puppeteer. They can react in ways that are very contextual to how an audience might want. And we used an analogy that we were working on a while ago. It's a story now looks like this sort of, imagine a skateboarding half pipe, right? So you've got the story, the narrative running down it, and that has tension and pace. It's running down a bit because it's got a forward momentum, it's got forward movement, and that's what's generating the tension. But what that improvisation can do, and what we're seeing is that then if you as a participant are part of that story, you're zooming down this half pipe, but then you've got a curiosity. You want to be able to interact with a particular character. That's going to take you up the half pipe, and you may start to have a conversation with Darth Vader about what favorite smoothie he likes. Now, that's a good example because in that instance, probably the answer's not going to be, well, I really like, strawberries and banana and things. That's not in character. So to be able to have this structure that then brings you back down into the narrative and says that's not important right now. What's important is da da da, and moves the story on. Caters for it really nicely. So we look at that half pipe as being a really neat structure for the way in which writers can start to use these forms, and acknowledging also that storytelling is so much is at the core of the experience, but that it's complicated. So is there a way, and we believe there is, that using something like we've built with Charismatic, writers who've got a story in their head, but they don't necessarily know how to structure it possibly properly, can see it manifested very quickly, and then they can test whether or not they like it, and then we can and then they can critique it, edit it, and improve it. So there's a process of sort of learning through creation that I quite like.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I want to spend a minute talking about the physical environment and the evolution and kind of the narrative in physical environments. We've seen the growth of things like the sphere in Vegas and Cosm and those types of things. And so, Nigel, I'm going to start with you just on that sense. How do you think that immersive physical spaces are reframing narrative?
Yeah, I think they're tremendous in both from an additive, like specifically to those experiences you mentioned, like the sphere or the cosm. Like you go to cosm and you're going to watch a very traditional 2D film like The Matrix. Suddenly you're expanded right into that world, and it becomes, what is the charm of a theater, going to the movie theater, which is like a shared experience, right? You're with someone and you're going, whoa, and you're looking up and you're laughing and, that was weird. And, you're having these emotive things versus, these kind of more solo, even like at home TV or video game or whatever your on rails experience that you've chosen to engage immersive wise, right? I always personally, by the way, think of, people can want to, just because a movie could be customized in any which way in real time doesn't mean, I want to watch a Christopher Nolan film because I want to watch a Christopher Nolan film. It's his vision, it's his point of view. That being said, I would love to be in Disneyland in Star Wars and see that immersive interaction as like stormtroopers questioning me, and I'm within that world, all the way to like expanding into building Legos, so to speak. But yeah, I love like places like the Sphere and the Cosm. I think we were, or even just like VR type gaming experiences where you're getting to do Squid Game with your friends and things like that. I think there's a tremendous need and growth for those types of experiences. Ultimately, we want to get out of our house, and we want to be incentivized to get out of our house. And when you go to watch a game, a traditional, like what, by the way, all the badass stuff. I love Rosemary's work. It's definitely, the shirt has earned the name there. You get to see these incredible boats and things, but you may not actually know what's really quite going on. And so having those augmented elements that can help enhance that experience. Like I'm not a baseball fan. I went to a baseball game and I was really pleased by all the added data that was just on the jumbotron to help me, like, okay, onboarding. I'm an Irish person, by the way, if you haven't guessed. That's why I don't know much about baseball. But anyway, that just enhanced it for me and made it like where I was starting to root along for the Giants. I don't know. I was up at the Bay. Sorry, Lakers. I mean Dodgers. Gosh, I'm confusing the sports. There you go. That's how Irish I am. But yeah, I think there is just a tremendous need and desire, and how do you enhance that? How do you bring those moments alive and make it shareable, worthwhile? You show up at an event and you have something that you can take away and tell people about. I think it's really, really important, and there's continued growth in that area and investment in that area for sure.
Jeff, what are you seeing in terms of the signals of these physical environments, and what are you teaching your students these days?
We just finished a large musical project that was kind of part XR staging, but part physical staging with the audience in the middle, with the performers. And I think to some extent, we weren't sure what would it be like to be inside of this kind of immersive roller disco situation. And I think for, the audience, what was exciting about the physicality of it was a chance to kind of take on a bit of pretend play, right? To move towards, how do I participate in a way that makes sense to me and in my body at this moment. And I think our students have been, intrigued by how to interpret accessibility in this really expansive way. How do we have 3 or 4 different ways for people to engage physically, emotionally in the story? And you get, I think, in a physical environment, many more options, right? To give people not just where to look or where to kind of go in a digital world, but do they stand up or sit down? Do they dance with somebody else, or are they watching? And I think that the sort of exciting part of these physical experiences has been to take choices that, maybe we got locked into thinking about the digital options that existed, and take those digital options and expand them into, a series of different sort of physical whole body opportunities. And so it's a bit, I think Guy sort of alluded to it, kind of returning to historical theatrical techniques for participation and immersion, and see how they then intersect with keeping the media moving or the media connected to those kind of choices by using the real-time options that are out there. So I think a lot of interesting sort of really broad interpretation of accessibility has been fun for the students.
Rosemary, do you see any barriers to creative experimentation today, either technical or just institutional?
I think imagination is one of the barriers that we run into. I just had a potential new customer conversation today, and through showing what we are doing, some people then go, oh, could we do this and this and this, and they just never thought of it. And I think, it's our job also as creators to really give them that intention that they can bring forward to their business. So it means that we have to understand their business to help them. So I think that's one of the things. Technologically, of course, there's still a few barriers. There's certain things that are not as easy yet, because otherwise other people would have done it, right? Full soccer games in high poly Unreal Engine with no motion capture suit. Yes, that'd be great. We're not there yet. We're getting there. We're going to do it. We're going to make it happen. But some of those are just, they're not necessarily barriers. They're just technology hasn't advanced to the point that we need yet. But I think then coming back to what, for example, Nigel and Jeff has said, where location and character then really, really come into play is to make sure that you make that a shared experience for people to then really understand with each other, here's what we're going through. And let's be honest, I mean, most of the shared experiences that were absolutely perfect, we won't remember in life, right? We remember the trips we took where stuff went wrong and where things just didn't quite happen. And I think that's why, for example, racing and other things are so important, or an artist that stands on stage and goes, oh, wow, I didn't think 65,000 people would listen to me. That makes it even more endearing. And I think that's the kind of moments that you can only find in that space as something is happening in real time. And that's the ones I'm most excited about.
I love it. Okay, we're getting close to the lightning round here, so I'm going to ask two final questions, and then we'll call it an evening. But and start with you, Jeff. I always like to ask each of the folks that are part of the discussions, what is one shift? In this case, what is one storytelling shift that you think we'll see within the next 12 months?
I think for me, it's a tool set shift. It's the intersection of creative coding and linear storytelling. And so Nigel brought up Cursor, and I've been thinking a lot about how development is changing, software development is changing, and the idea that language brings access to software development for people who have not historically had it. And so whether I hope in a year we'll see how it goes, but this intersection between how we think about coding, software coding, creative projects, and the sort of language of storytelling are getting intermingled. And I'm excited about what that looks like and kind of what the results are going to be there.
Rosemary, back to you.
For me, I think from a storytelling perspective, I see a shift in being the audience, being the participatory element, and helping to craft and create those stories that we have, to really have that more interactive. And I think that is really where, for me, the excitement of AI comes in, where we can help the audience help us create the stories for the future.
I love it. Guy.
Pretty similar. I think it's about, I mean, it's an overused word, but democratizing the ability to create the story, make it easy, give people, lower the barriers to entry, because ultimately then they're going to be off the races faster. And that's been the guiding vision for Charismatic AI, is to give people those tools and see what happens, And if I may just say, one of our clients was talking to me the other day, and he said, I have an autistic 12-year-old daughter who has loads of ideas and story ideas, but she's not very good at the structure. Can you help us? Like, yeah, that's exactly what we were built to do, is to enable that and get people off to the races earlier. So that's that democratization I'll see very soon.
Nigel,
and yes, please, to off to the races.
Yeah, I think it is actually in the tools themselves, and the pipelines themselves are starting to extract and I think a lot of if we think about storytelling, or like text to video, for example, a lot of those solutions that are currently out now weren't really made with filmmakers or even traditional storytellers in mind. So it's great that it's like, hey, I can do this thing and see something, but it's like, well, now I know how camera works, I know how lenses work, so how do I break that out? So I see solutions like Moon Valley, like Mary, their AI tool, how they're thinking about actually filmmaking and like breaking it up into a process like that. So I envision a lot of tools going into that way. And then I do think there's also going to be a lot more emphasis again around like the ethics of the content and how it's created. So I think we'll, in 12 months, as you say, we'll probably find out a lot of things, both legally with the lawsuits going on, as well as actually just consumer wants for tools and processes that they feel good about.
I'd like to close with one final question about what is one format or behavior that creators should experiment now before it's mainstream? Things that you're experimenting with that folks might not know about. And Rosemary, I'm going to start with you.
Putting us on the spot here. I like it. I think one of the things that we're experimenting a lot about is how we really bring real world storytelling into the digital world. And take all of that history and the knowledge of the actual physical place and surroundings into the technology. And I think that's something that could be a real challenge because we learn stuff from 15-second intervals nowadays, and that kind of history and background often gets lost.
That's great. Jeff.
I'm pretty intrigued by world models from which people are synthesizing interactions. So there's a demo that I saw. I think Mirage is the name of the demo from Dynamics Lab, and so they're looking at what is a kind of user-driven game experience where you can steer the kind of creation of the game world by prompting it in addition to interacting it with as you go. And I think there's technically there's a long way to go. But as far as kind of understanding some of the opportunities for how media is going to shift, it's been interesting to start to see that kind of thing come out.
Terrific. Guy.
Which we've been tracking microdramas. Started in China, overtaken Chinese box office within 3 years, and rising in the US and around Europe. So that's something that we've been, short episodes, 2 to 3 minutes. It's that nano story sort of generation, but seeing how it changes the storytelling format is fascinating.
I bet it is. Nigel.
Yeah, it's a great. I mean, I feel like everyone's hitting. I do think there's, on the format side, with headsets, there's been this push and pull of, slimming them down and what are those immersive storytelling experiences that you're listening to that we're just out and about experiencing real world that you can experience just again via your AI smart glasses. A lot of what we work on is fully immersive, but we are out in the world and experiencing podcasts and audiobooks, and I'd be very, very curious to continue to push and that side of it. And then the last thing I encourage people to really crack open is how do you expose craft? Because I do think we really care about craft. Otherwise, formats like stop motion animation or 2D animation would disappear, right? If it was all about just cheaper, quicker, faster. I do think people care about craft, and there is craft to all of this, these new formats. And so how do you also expose that without like inhibiting or taking away from the actual story and immersion of it? So yeah.
Well, this has been an incredible conversation. Just to recap some of the themes of what we've talked about today. There's a desire for artists to get closer to creating the tools. So how can we bring the coder together with the storytellers? The idea, the ethical aspects have come up over and over again, right? Should we be creating what we are creating, and how do we disclose to individuals of what's real and what is synthetic, and how do we involve them into the process? And back to that involvement, it seemed like there was a real interest in bringing the audience in to be participatory into the art of storytelling and to give that sort of creative juice to the folks that are producing these new tools and systems. We talked somewhat about just different formats. Nigel just touched upon headsets. We talked about micro dramas that are coming to the forefront. Rosemary shared the work that Badass is doing in real time with boats in Monaco, and sort of all the augmented reality components that are coming to the forefront. So it is the most exciting time, I believe, that we've ever been in this world of creative freedom. And we know that the best stories of the future won't be written by AI or by humans alone. They're going to be co-created. And these are the folks that are are at the forefront. And so I'm so thrilled that you are all able to join us today. Jeff, Nigel, Rosemary, and Guy, it was a pleasure. I'd love to do this again in person. We could add augmented components to it as well, but I look forward to it. And everybody who is watching, thank you for joining us, and look forward to seeing you again very soon.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you very much.
Thank you very much.